feel free to write your questions, remarks in the chat. We will discuss it after the presentation. We still have at least 15 minutes or maybe even 20 minutes to discuss your questions. Next slide, please, Julika. This is our program for today. We have some welcome remarks, some opening remarks. Then our main presenter is coming. And yeah, then we still have time for discussion, and I will do a wrap up and closing, and I'm the facilitator for today. Okay, let me just hand over to our Deputy Head of Project, Veronica Kling, for some welcome words. Please, Veronica.
Thank you, Stefan. On behalf of the Agri-Business Facility for Africa, and especially our head of project, Magnus Schmidt, I would like to welcome you all. My special welcome goes to Sophie Primo and Luis Rodriguez Menciabal from Directorate General of International Partnerships, or INTPA, of the European Commission. Sophie Primo will welcome us subsequently, and of course the EU Commission is the major donor and partner of our project, and therefore it is an honor for us to have you today in this event. Furthermore, I want to welcome you, Jeremy Knopf, Managing Director of CoLead, and Morag Webb, Head of Science and Policy, and Chris Downs, Policy and Law Lead Expert of CoLead. So why are we doing this expert talk? Just a brief word on our project. So together with the GIZ project MOVE ComCashew, Agribusiness Facility for Africa, or short ABF, implements a component 1 of an EU framework program. And this cooperation aims to develop and improve the capacities of actors along the agricultural value chains, such as cocoa, cashew, maize, and livestock sector in 79 African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries in order to promote investment. One of the key pillars of our agribusiness facility program is a matching grant fund, where we invite applicants to apply with innovative projects from the African, Caribbean, and Pacific states. The deadline for this application of this second call is tomorrow. So we expect a number of multi-stakeholder matching grant fund projects that would have a component or have an important element that considering integration with the EU market, so EU market access. However, this is everything but easy. So there are legal, private, and sometimes unwritten rules which have to be obliged to get full access to the European market. And CoLead is a key player in providing information, especially for agricultural products, to get information about EU market access. Therefore, we have invited them, and we are very happy to see that they accepted this invite as one of our core partners to tell us more about their approach. So together, we also aim to elaborate common areas of collaboration and find further synergies and strengthening the partnership. So with that small introduction, with a description of the purpose of this event, I would like to hand over to Sophie Primo from the Directorate General from INTPA of the EU Commission. Sophie, the word is you.
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you, Stefan. Welcome to all participants, and thank you for this initiative. I think by now you know me. I'm not very fond of long introductions, so I will prefer to leave some time for the discussion. Just a few things to complement Veronica. I think I also want to say that this meeting that we are all attending today takes place under the bigger umbrella of the framework program for agricultural value chains. And as a donor, I'm very pleased to see and to welcome many of the implementing partners that work together to reach the objectives of this framework program. we always want to create synergies and to foster collaboration. So this is very agreeable to see. I know that colleagues of ITC also implementing another part of the framework program should be on the call, so very welcome. And also another element I would like to add, I think the word resilient is very important. It's in the title of the framework program. It is also in the project that GIZ is implementing. And when I speak about resilience, I immediately think about the alignment with EU Green Deal and with sustainable transformation of agri-food system. And I think this is very interesting to have many experts with different level of intervention, with different networks. And I think the objective now is to see how when something is spotted by one but doesn't really enter into the remit of the project, how can it serve for the purposes of other partners? So always having in mind the legislative challenges and of course the bigger challenges of the Green Deal and of climate change, of environmental protection. So this should we always keep in mind when having the discussions. I will stop here and I will enjoy the discussions. Thank you very much, Stéphane. Over to you.
Thanks very much for your opening remarks. And yeah, let's not lose much time now. I will hand over to Jeremy, the Managing Director of CoLead, one of our core partners in the EU Framework Program. Please, over to you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Stéphane, Veronica, and Sophie for these introductions. I'll be covering a short introduction about CoLead before my colleagues Chris and Moraga will guide us through the rest of the presentation. So CoLead, some of you attending today's call might know us as CoLead ECP. So our name has changed from CoLead ECP to CoLead, Community Linking Entrepreneurship Agriculture Development. One of the reasons is we've started managing the Agri-Info program, but we'll get back to this later. So we're a private sector not-for-profit association, and we'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. Our members are private sector operators, mainly producers, processors, traders of agri-food products with a focus on fruit and veg, a historical focus. It's within really our DNA. And the association really was set up 50 years ago within with a key aspect of facilitating inclusive and sustainable trade between Africa, Caribbean, Pacific countries and the European Union when it came to horticultural produce. This, of course, has evolved, while still, of course, a very strong component of our work. Today, we really define our mission rather broadly, as indicated here on the slide you have in front of you, to facilitate and implement activities to increase the contribution of the agriculture and horticulture sector, in particular, to achieving SDGs. In order to do this, our key focus, as encapsulated by our vision, is to focus on human capital, on skills and competencies, on information. And from an operational perspective, our work is really organized around three divisions. One really on facilitating market access, which is really more monitoring, identifying, understanding what's taking place on markets in terms of trends, conditions to access them. Then it comes to really strengthening directly value chains, mainly through technical assistance and training. And then it's about leveraging impact, given the scale today of the challenges that we're trying to contribute to. So in order to perform these activities, historically we've been was very much supported by donors, amongst which the most important ones are the EU and an Organization of Africa, Caribbean, Pacific States. You have here on the slide a kind of overview of the different programs that have been managed since 20 years. The really two important names at this stage are the Fit for Market Plus program, which is a new ACPS program that started late 2021, beginning 2022, and which is our core focus on the horticultural sector and on facilitating market access within a sustainable framework in a post-COVID environment. And the second program is Agri-Info, and Agri-Info program will be the focus of today's presentation. It's a new funded program that goes beyond horticulture and beyond Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific country, and looks mainly at providing an information service. Over the years, well, since we've been starting really the management and implementation of all these programs, we kind of dedicated a large part of our work to build up and consolidating a number of technical resources, which are today available, open access, which were designed really initially in the context, mainly for most of these resources in the context of the horticultural sector, but can for these large parts of them also be used and leveraged in other value chains. We see here a couple of elements. I guess the presentation will be shared afterwards, and there are some links embedded really within the presentation, so you can easily access these different resources within the e-learning platform, a library. Regulations, that's mainly the Agri-Info program again, and Chris and Mike will get back to this later. But so a large part also of our efforts today throughout the programs to make sure that these resources are available to the largest numbers of potential partner beneficiaries, directly and indirectly, of course, through collaborations such as the one we are setting up with GIZ. So maybe if you can go to the next slide, Chris. Just a last slide here, basically on the overall context of our of this collaboration has already been said during the introduction. For us also, it's fundamental. Again, we firmly believe that it is absolutely essential to be collaborating with similar organizations, programs. There's a clear complementarity in this case in terms of overall objectives, but also in terms of value chains, which are covered. And the discussions so far, we've been having them around three main areas, which correspond basically to the three main output areas of the business support within the business support facility for resilient agricultural value chains, the programs that are implemented at the moment by GIZ. So one on the skills for agribusiness. So there are some discussions, of course, because there are e-learning tools and learning capacity and training capacity on both sides, and it's how to basically make sure that there's no duplication in terms of efforts, and that we are able also to do some cross promotion, of course, of available resources. Then there's a matching grant fund. Of course, ourselves at the moment, we mainly, I would say, on the assistance and training side, mainly involved with operators who are not in the value chains which are targeted by the agribusiness facility and MoveCom Cashew, but still we're in regular contact. So the idea here is to really promote this facility, and similarly, we can have through the Fit for Market Plus program a technical assistance and training component, which could be relevant for maybe some applications that come through the matching grant fund and which are not necessarily eligible because not of the relevant value chain, or even if within those value chains we can think about collective approaches. And number three, the policy dialogue and South-South exchange. And if I'm not mistaken, this expert talk today is the materialization of already kind of a very concrete collaboration between ourselves. So thanks again for the opportunity, the invitation, and we're looking forward to your feedback, to your questions, and to a fruitful coming collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. So I'm going to very briefly just set the scene, which explains a little bit the rationale behind the Agri-Info program. So as we all know, EU has historically produced lots of regulations. So for example, for food safety regulations, typically 50 to 100 regulations per year. The Green Deal and why the Green Deal, I think, has created so much interest and concern in a way worldwide, is that the EU is now moving far beyond food safety into areas of environmental and social concerns that touch very much on the very politically sensitive national areas of policy. And the EU Green Deal is the farm to fork. It is all the initiatives listed here, which to a large extent or to a larger or less extent will have an impact on low and middle income countries, but also the due diligence initiatives listed here. To briefly summarize, we see three major trends of the Green Deal package on non-EU countries. The first is clearly going to be a demand for information. EU businesses will have to know much more about what is happening in the supply chain and be able to communicate that information and demonstrate that they are paying attention to what is happening in the chain. The second area is the indirect impact of EU rules on non-EU countries. Now, to a certain extent, we've always had this today with food safety regulations, that EU food law does have an indirect impact on production processes in developing countries. But now, particularly in the area of pesticides, where the EU is becoming increasingly strict, this will have a greater impact on what suppliers are permitted to do. And then we have those rules that are much more directly impacting suppliers, and this is where the EU is being very careful that by introducing stricter rules in Europe, we are not simply shifting bad practices towards other countries. And this is where the EU is looking to regulate production processes in supplier countries, and this particularly in the area of sustainable packaging, but also in the area of animal welfare, where looking to in a sense extraterritorially be influencing and changing processes in third countries. An obvious example of this, and you'll all, I'm sure, be very familiar with this, so I won't dwell on this because we're short for time, the EU deforestation regulation, which is clearly going to put in place a series of demands in terms of information that must be passed on from the farmer through the supply chain to EU buyers. And we know very well, and you'll be probably dealing with this already, how complicated that will be due to the nature of some of these value chains, the aggregated nature of the supply, and the fact that this information will require new traceability systems. But the real point we wanted to emphasize here is, while we are very aware of deforestation, and there's been a lot of political exposure to this, it is not simply these big initiatives that have an impact on trade. This is a recent example. In a sense, it's a very simple technical regulation that the EU is introducing or has introduced a new nicotine maximum residue level for vanilla. And when this was first proposed in July, the Madagascan vanilla sector were largely unaware or did not respond necessarily to the proposal. It was only really when it was published in February that the sector started to reflect on the implications. And what we discovered is that there is a significant percentage of Madagascan vanilla today that has levels of nicotine that exceed the new maximum residue level that has been introduced, which creates enormous problems for the supply of vanilla from the vanilla sector to the European Union. Now, this is actually going to be solved following discussions with the EU. This will be resolved with a new regulation next year. But in the meantime, there's a lot of uncertainty for exporters as will they be able to enter the EU market. And this is a significant economic issue. As you can see there, Madagascan vanilla exports to the EU represent a very large percent of global goods exports, and in total 2% of GDP. So, of course, if such small technical regulations have such a big impact, it is crucial that we are aware of not just the big initiatives like deforestation, but all initiatives that could potentially have an impact on food trade. So as a result of the Green Deal and the F2F strategy, the Farm to Fork strategy, we have a series of challenges. We need to understand what information is going to be required by buyers in the future to evidence compliance. There will clearly be a need to set up new tools, technologies and systems to collect and record this information. In addition to that, there'll be a complex process of putting in place traceability systems, and these traceability systems may vary according to the particular regulation or EU initiative. And there will be a greater need for, we feel, certification, and that in itself will have and create greater costs in terms of adapting and evidencing practices. And one of the reflections is that some of these EU rules are very much designed for the EU context, so they may be actually more challenging and costly for third countries to implement. And these initiatives are not coming one by one, they are coming in parallel, and therefore another area of concern is the accumulation of these different initiatives and the potential implications. So above all, what we need to be doing is keeping track of these multiple and overlapping changes in EU rules, and this is really where the Agri-Info programme comes in.
So good morning, everybody. Yes, as Chris was saying, what is this Agri-Info programme about? Why was it created, and what role does it fill? And quite importantly, what we want to try and do today is end up with some discussion with yourselves about, how this programme can also help you. Keeping up with the new rules is incredibly challenging because, as Chris was saying, just on food safety, you have around 50 new initiatives, new regulations coming every year. And on top of that, we're seeing significant new requirements coming in under the Green Deal, particularly in relation to due diligence. And so in this context, what do we need to do to make sure that trade keeps flowing? And most importantly, I think probably for all of us, is how do we make sure that no one is left behind? That there is a risk here that, as always, when you have a change, those who are bigger and better resourced are much more able to meet new requirements than others. So this is a really critical concern, in particular for small companies and smallholder growers, for example. So what do you need if you want to keep up with the rules and make sure that you do keep your place in the value chain? With regard to new requirements, new regulations, what's critically important is, as an operator and as a public authority, is to know what's happening, when it's happening, and what it is that you need to do. If you're a cashew farmer, for example, or a cashew exporting company, and there's a new EU regulation coming in on pesticide maximum residue levels, you need to know that, and you need to know in time in order that you can adapt your practices. You can potentially look for alternative pest management techniques, etc. And when these changes are going to affect the food that you supply to the European Union. So you need to know what you need to do about that. And you need to get that information in a form that is also understandable. And so something that's really important with this programme, we're not duplicating information that's already there. There's an awful lot of information out there on what regulations are changing, but finding that information and interpreting and understanding it is not always straightforward for third countries. Another element that's important here is to really understand what the implications are for a particular country or a particular sector. So when a new rule comes in, as we mentioned before, this will affect different people differently. So what do they mean for different countries or different sectors? And very importantly, in the context of the Green Deal and this drive towards more sustainable food systems, are they really going to contribute to achievement of the SDGs in that context? So there's always a risk when, the market and the importing country introduces changes that seem the right thing to do in that context. They might be quite Eurocentric in this context, but what does it mean when you translate that into a third country where the production environment is very different, where you may face different challenges and you've got different access to resources? So it's really important to understand what the implications of these changes are in that different context. And in the light of that, is there a need for accompanying measures, some particular support, financial assistance or technical assistance in order to help both public and private stakeholders to adapt to these new requirements? So really, this is the context in which Agri-Info was created and conceived. So next slide, please, Chris. This is a communication and an information system. And as I was saying, we're not duplicating information that is there. We're not creating new information, but we're trying to bring it all together into one place and to make it available in a very sort of easy to use, accessible form. It covers more than just fruit and vegetables. As Jeremy was explaining earlier, Co-Lead historically is focused very much on the horticulture sector. And in fact, a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment with Agri-Info is work that we've historically done as Co-Lead, but really targeted just to Africa, Caribbean, Pacific countries and also to the horticulture value chain. We're now going beyond that and we're looking at all agri-food value chains and also fish that are linked to that are supplying the EU market. And it's also going beyond ACP to look at all low, middle and upper middle income countries. So it's 142 countries in total. And within that context, our really key target partner beneficiaries are the competent authorities, the producers, producer associations, exporter associations, and also farmer organisations. These are the people at the end of the day that need to know about regulatory change and that have to act on it and put in place mitigating measures. So this is why this is our sort of real target. But reaching that target is a real challenge. We know that there are already many systems in place to transmit information from the European authorities to national authorities to private sector. So while these existing lines of information and communication are there, we all also know that they don't always necessarily work that efficiently and effectively. And so it's recognizing that there is a need to make information more accessible and more easily understandable and usable that was really the driving force behind this idea of creating the Agri-Info programme. So we have three main areas of activity. The first is just simply to monitor and document change. And so we have a team of people in Brussels, and every day we're monitoring what's published, what's made available on lots of different websites and information sources. So we pull all of that information together and we compile it into a database so that it's made accessible. But we go, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but we go then beyond that. We have a certain number of activities that are really directed towards understanding. Once we know that these things are coming into place, we need to understand what it means potentially for exporting countries. And that helps us to better organise our activities so that we communicate proactively to the people who need that information. And that includes obviously partners such as yourselves, so that, if there may be a change that's going to be particularly challenging for a group of stakeholders, what do we need to do and how best to reach them and how best to support them in order to align with the new requirements? So perhaps, through accompanying measures. So next, please, Chris. The first line of communication, if you like, that we have is our database. So this is an open access database. It's free for anybody to use. And it has search facilities so that, if you have a particular sector or a particular topic that you're interested in, you can search the database to find information on that. So I quickly yesterday put in cashew to see what came up. And of course, there's quite a long list of pesticide residue changes that are of importance for the cashew sector. But it's a very searchable and easy, intuitive website. But something that I really wanted to emphasize here was the links that we have with other EU resources. It's important to emphasize that Agrinfo is not a definitive database on all the different things that you need to do to access the EU market. We're simply focusing on where there's a change. And not really what's already existing. So we have links in there to, for example, the Access to Markets database, where there's a lot of information. If you say you want to export cashew, what do you need to do? What requirements, what rules are in place? Access to Markets is a better place to go. What we do is to complement that by saying these changes are coming into place. This is what you need to do in order to meet this change, and this is when you need to do it. So we're focusing on what's coming into place, what's upcoming, what's in development, and what's actually happening now and what you need to do about it. We do find that our stakeholders, our partner beneficiaries, often have concerns about what that means for them. And so we also have an Ask Agrinfo facility so that people can send us messages and say, I really don't understand what this means. Can you please explain? Or I don't know what this means for me. What do I need to do about it? And so we have this Ask Agrinfo facility also. So next, please, Chris. Every 2 weeks, we issue a newsletter. The timing is normally every 2 weeks, but it may vary slightly, really depending on the volume of changes that are coming out of the European Commission. But basically, through our monitoring, every couple of weeks, we see what's new and we put records onto the database, and then we highlight those changes in a newsletter. So if there's a new regulation coming up, for example, that's going to affect cashew, that would be highlighted in our headlines here. And so the idea is that by giving these updates regularly and not only focusing on what's published now, but as I said, what's upcoming, it gives people more time to adjust and more time to understand what it is that they need to do and to put those changes in process. It's important to emphasize here that our records it's challenging for us because really we're quite limited. We don't want to do too much interpretation of what the rules are because that becomes legally quite tricky. But it is also important to synthesize a lot of really complicated information that's published in the regulations and is written with sort of legal language and quite complex technical concepts. How do you actually put that into a form that everybody understands, all along value chains and across public and private sectors where you've got such a very wide audience and wide constituency? So we do try to focus on explaining in a simple way what's changing, why it's changing, what do you need to do about it, and what are the implications for you, and when these changes are going to come in place. And on our database, which you can access through these updates, you can download this information as a PDF file, and we have the full record, which is normally between 2 and 5 pages. And then we have a short version, which is generally a page, which is much more easy to use to disseminate to third parties. So we try to make this very intuitive and easy to use. And easy to use as a source of information that you can then extract from and disseminate that to other people. So we should highlight that again, this is free and it's open access. Everybody can use it, and we really recommend that people subscribe to the newsletter so that they get these regular updates and they don't miss something important that might be happening. So next, please, Chris. But yeah, I think Chris has gone to sleep there. Hi, Chris. Oh, here we are. Okay, so finally, this is the last thing that we want to cover today, is that this is where we potentially have more conversations to have with yourselves. It's about these wider services that we can offer through the Agri-Info programme. First and foremost, what we really appreciate the opportunity today is to engage with you all and to really ask for your help to disseminate information about the Agri-Info database and the newsletter, etc., so that more people use it and know that it's there and they know how they can use it. So we're looking at more opportunities to disseminate and upscale. But in addition to that, we have these other activities that we can do, which is about, again, understanding the potential impacts as a donor community, as practitioners of technical assistance programs. So it's really trying to generate better understanding of what these implications are by, first of all, identifying which countries are particularly vulnerable to change. So, countries that would be particularly vulnerable are ones that rely a lot on a particular commodity. And where a lot of their produce, a lot of that commodity is actually going to the European market. So we're doing work that going through trade data, etc., to try and identify in different regions which countries are particularly vulnerable to changes in which particular sectors. And so this enables us to know that when you've got a new regulation that's coming in, those countries are likely to be disproportionately affected and may need targeted information or assistance. And so we're supporting these prioritisation exercises with some more in-depth market analyses and profiles of individual sectors, again, to really understand within those sectors who are the people that risk being left behind, who are commercially are going to be most disadvantaged and potentially the ones which lack the resources to be able to comply. And in a certain number of cases, we don't have a huge amount of resources to do this, but we can do a small number of impact studies where we can do a deep dive to better understand, what the particular implications may be for a small constituency. But here, we're not working alone. We know that there are many people conducting impact studies with whom we are, discussing to see what we can do to add value and how they can add value to us. So these are all areas where there is sort of potential for us to engage in further dialogue and also further proactive activities. And finally, we do have the capacity to go further than just providing the database, which is a sort of fairly static, it's less active and dynamic. It's just there for people to use. But going beyond that, where we know that there are really critical information needs for particular countries, sectors or partners, we do email alerts and we try to target those to the people who we feel really need this information on an urgent basis. And we offer webinars so that when you have something new coming on board, like the deforestation initiative, we can do webinars to explain in much more detail what they're about, what the requirements actually are, and what you may need to do as a sector, say as cacao sector in a particular country. What does it need for you, and what do you need to do? And we can also produce customized reports and countries. So we wanted to highlight that today in this call, because it's, again, if you become aware of a sector or a group of holders who you feel would really benefit from getting this more sort of customized and additional communication, please don't hesitate to come back to us and we could work with you potentially to put together more intensive information and communication. So I think that's our last slide before we go into our discussion and we talk, to try and understand what more we can do as the Agri-Info service, what we can do for you in terms of perhaps complementing the information that you're providing to your constituency, your stakeholders, and also, of course, being a bit selfish, we're very keen to know what you can do for us and where we can get more information, in particular a better understanding of what potential implications of some of these new initiatives are. So I think we've got 2 minutes to spare, Stefan, and we'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jeremy, Chris, and Morok, for this very intensive presentation and giving us a deep dive in your work, showing us some very good examples of your important work. And I think, yeah, that was quite good. Thanks very much. So, and you are excellent in time. We still have 16 minutes to go. And basically now I would like to open the floor for our participants. Do you have any questions, ladies and gentlemen, which you want to ask either to Jeremy, Chris, or Morok, to the different working fields? Then I would kindly ask you to raise your hand if you want. And then please also open your camera. All right, if there's, yeah, Mimona, please come in.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. It was super informative. And my question is that you told us that the agri-food, the Agri-Info website, it includes changes. But where can I find the already existing information?
Chris, could we go back to the slide with the link? Oh, it's the other way. On the website, there are links to other EU resources and another EU-funded initiative. So that one, you can see the links there if you click on the links. We have links to access to markets, which gives a lot of information on the procedures, etc., to access different EU markets for different commodities. So we would, highly recommend that that's a resource that you use. We also have other links in there, not very many. We've highlighted those platforms and existing information sources that we feel are particularly important and relevant. There's a CBI program that's run also by the Netherlands that is incredibly helpful in terms of trying to get a better understanding of what you need to do, for example, to sell cashews or another commodity into the European market. And we also have put links in there to the ITC standards map, because we mustn't forget that in addition to the regulations, there are many private voluntary industry standards that are also really important if you want to access particularly the retail sector in the European Union. And the ITC standards map is a very, very good resource in terms of giving a really good overview of which of the standards are relevant and important to access particular markets for particular commodities. So I'd recommend that you go just explore our website and see what links are there.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Thanks very much. Well, I do have also one question myself, but I also want to explain to the audience, to our participants, and this is also exactly the working field where CoLead and the Agri-Business Facility for Africa are working together, because we have also one of our pillars of our projects are e-learning tools. So we want to come together with CoLead and develop e-learning tools which take those information from CoLead, and then we bring it on our platform Atingui, and then people all over the world can use it. And this is also what Sophie Renaud was mentioning right in the beginning, that these are the collaborations we're doing together within the EU framework program. But let me have also a question to you. You were saying at one point at your presentation you are communicating proactively. All right, I understood that. But let's take the example, for example, vanilla and Madagascar. You mentioned it on your third or fourth slide. How are you doing it? How are you communicating proactively? Are you approaching the producers, the exporters? You can take that example, but you can also take maybe any other example if you want. But I'm interested to getting more information on this, please.
That's a good question, Stefan. It's things that we should really have covered in more detail in the presentation, but there was a lot to get in there. The potential target beneficiaries of this programme are huge, and we obviously can't interact with everybody. So the way that we try to do it, it's following an approach that we've historically used with co-lead in it, and that's to work through relay entities. And so we use these relays in order to try to reach a wider group of people. And so our relays are these competent authorities and the business associations and farmer organisations in individual countries. But also coming back a step from that, we try to coordinate as best we can with embassies in Brussels, who traditionally have a really important role in disseminating information about regulatory change, as well, of course, as with the European delegations in country and with donor partners. So in the case of vanilla, unfortunately, that happened before Agri-Info was fully up and running, and we hope that, you know, with the facility that we have now, the likelihood of that happening, where the sector is missing an important opportunity to respond to a regulatory change before it's published, we hope that we would be less likely to miss that now with this new programme, and it's one of the reasons, right, really, why we felt the need for it. I should have mentioned that in our updates, we also highlight opportunities to feed back to EU consultation and also to the WTO when a new regulation is notified. So if that MRL came in today and the change was notified, our proactive communication would be to the Embassy of Madagascar and other countries that are exporting vanilla. It would be to the delegations in country, and it would be very importantly to the sector associations. And so those sector associations would then be the ones to liaise with their membership and to respond. And so what we try to do is for each country and each sector, identify who those really key players are to help us get the information out, but also to be the ones that react to that and potentially respond to consultation when that happens. And so this is a good example. We're a small team based in Brussels, and we're doing what we can to identify those relays, but we really appreciate opportunities to strengthen our contact base, if you like, so that we can reach a wider range of people. And so that's, again, why we appreciate this opportunity today. I hope that answers your question, Stefan.
Yes, please. Thanks very much. Are there any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? Simon, please.
Thanks a lot to the COLI team for these very, very interesting presentations so far. I think I wanted to come in maybe less with a question than with a comment from my side. I think it became quite clear from your inputs that the topic of traceability is quite fundamental, and I mean, we've seen the traceability discussion for years now, but to me it's clear this will become even more important. The topic of cost of these traceability solutions has already been mentioned, but I also wanted to encourage to consider this topic a bit more also in the awareness raising and information campaign. At least with partners who work on the topic, because I think our experience coming from the agri-business space is that traceability solutions are ambitious technical solutions to implement on the ground, especially when it comes to the producer organization level, where sometimes these solutions are also anchored. So I would see a lot of potential in sharing information on useful tools that can be adopted, also anchoring them at the producer level, because in many cases these traceability solutions are also implemented top down. So it's just I think a gap that I see, a lot of work to be done on the ground, and I think many actors along value chains have an information gap here. I know also some colleagues in the GIZ, for example, Ina Trace. I see a colleague here also in the call, work here on the ground to try to come up with open and operational solutions that are even interoperable, so not necessarily commercially anchored. So I think there is a tremendous potential also for us to add value and to also and allow some of the actors to comply with these quite ambitious standards. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Simon. I don't know if you want to respond to it, Morag, or...
It's a really, really important point. I'm just sort of quickly trying to think how we would complement what you're doing. I mean, it's absolutely fundamental. It's in the context that we're in now with this sort of development of the due diligence initiative. So much of it actually hangs on traceability that it's becoming the sort of, you know, a number one issue in lots of contexts. And I completely agree with you that we don't have enough information on how much that actually costs for different players, and especially thinking back to this leave no one behind, you know, critical factor that we have to bear in mind is that, you know, some of those that are risking being left behind are those that are in sort of very complicated value chains, informal value chains, and least resourced. So there are lots of really, really important issues here. As Agri-Info, we have to think heavily about our remit because, you know, we're not a technical assistance program, we're an information program. And so, you know, there are some things that we could do. And one thing that we have been considering is trying to get, you know, do a study in a very sort of targeted context where we try to better understand the potential cost implications of putting in place one of the traceability solutions that you mentioned there, Simon. But we could also think perhaps about having an information record within the database where we pull together links and further information to some of these solutions that you mentioned. And so it's not something we'd actually thought about before today, but it could be something that's quite useful to do. And so we could also then sort of cross-reference that in some of our other database records. So Simona, if you wouldn't mind sharing your email, I'd really like to come back to you on that and try to then compile together with you some of the solutions that you mentioned. If
Sure,
that would be okay.
My pleasure, and also will be glad to onboard some other GIZ colleagues working on the topic.
Okay, and you could help us then potentially put a good record together to summarize some of that information. So that would be really appreciated.
Thanks very much, Morag.
Chris, sorry, Stefan, go ahead.
Actually, there's still one question from Cote d'Ivoire, and I also want to give a couple opportunity to Mimi to ask her question, please. Mimi, please come in.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. Good morning. My name is Mini Balep from Cote d'Ivoire. I'm working as technical advisor on ABF. So what I wanted to know is there are a lot of Afri-shop in EU, a lot of Afri-shop. So is the products that they are selling, all the products that they are selling are coming from Africa? Is EU market regulation concerning also this kind of products or not? So, or if it is not, are there any kind of regulation in EU concerning especially this kind of product that are selling on this Africa shop? Thank you.
Thanks. Good question.
I'm not familiar with the products. I don't know whether Chris or Jeremy could come back on that one. what the specific products are? Can
Let's
anyone
take,
help with that?
The product that we found in this Africa shop in EU. A lot of Africa shop, they have we have a lot of Africa shop in EU, France, Germany, Belgium, all those. Yes, a lot. So EU regulate, there are any EU regulation about all these products or not, or is just a simple market? So
Okay, I think I know where you're coming from. So shops in the EU that are specifically supplying produce from Africa, they would all have to be compliant with EU regulations. So anything that's put in on the EU market, no matter where it's sold within the EU, has to comply with the EU regulations. And on top of that, may have to comply with individual member state or individual EU country regulations. So yes, they would definitely fall under the requirements. I hope that answers the question.
yes.
Okay. If you needed any more information on a particular product that was being supplied into Europe from Côte d'Ivoire, and you were concerned about something, you could, if you see the Ask Agri-Info there on the website, you could just drop us a note and we'll get back to you to give more information.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Chris, I see you have opened your mic. You still want to come in, or?
No, I was simply going to confirm what Morag said. In fact, yes, the EU regulations apply to all food, regardless of the supply chain.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 12 o'clock Central European time. I think we had a quite interesting presentation. We had quite interesting discussion. I just want to assure you that I will share the presentation with the whole of you. And in case there are still any questions left, this chat is still open and we will answer all your questions. I want to thank Sophie and Louis from DG INPA, that they took part in this meeting. I want to, of course, thank our colleagues from CoLead, our partners, and I wish you all a very nice day and upcoming weekend on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. All the best to you, and we stay in touch. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you.